I work a lot with farm food safety, enterprise planning, business planning, to help our agricultural producers grow their business and make their business more efficient. And I also work a lot with a lot of hobby farmers, folks that are doing food production in their backyard, that are just interested in developing their skills or wanting to move to the next level to become a small business. And I also work with a lot of agents across the region, as well as many organizations, to help develop a regional food system where we have access to our local producers. So what is the Cottage Food Law? Many of you probably have not heard of the Cottage Food Law, and it's basically an illegal arrangement to have exemption from food safety laws to produce low-risk food prepared in your home residence. So we're gonna talk today about what that really means. Basically, you do not need a license or permit from the Florida Department of Agriculture to be a cottage food operator. You're not inspected by any state government entity, and you can actually make up to $50,000 a year in sales, which is a nice sum of money. The challenge with the Cottage Food Law is that it's very, very limited on what you are allowed to actually produce in your home. And a lot of that has to do with food safety issues, which we're going to get into. So take a look here at what's allowed and what's not allowed under the Cottage Food Law. Things like breads, grains, homemade pastas, some cupcakes, some types of cakes and pastries are allowed. Honey is allowed. You can make jams and jellies and preserves in your home kitchen and sell it under the Cottage Food Law. Herb seasoning, dried fruits, trail mix, candies and confections. The things that are not allowed are going to be the types of food that increase the risk of foodborne illness. So things like meats, shellfish, canned fruits and vegetables, salsas, marinara sauces, pickles, fermented foods, any type of milk or dairy product, anything that needs to be refrigerated, fresh fruits, fresh juices, raw sprouts, baked goods that require refrigeration. So again, you can see what's allowed is very, very limited. And I'm gonna provide you a few examples of why that is. So the potentially hazardous foods is really what we're talking about here. And potentially hazardous food means a food that requires time and temperature control for safety. So if you look at this pH scale, it's a scientific measurement of how acidic or how basic a substance is. Depending on how acidic or basic a product is, it will allow for microorganisms to grow, and that could produce a toxin called botulism, which can be fatal. That's what we're trying to prevent here. A lower value on that pH scale is going to indicate that the substance is more acidic, where a higher value is going to indicate that the substance is more basic. So take, for example, water. That's neutral. It has a pH of 7. Lemonade, vinegar, they are acidic. They have a pH between 2 and 4. So that's why when you are canning fruits and vegetables and making a jam and a jelly out of it, you usually add acid to that product so that it can reduce the microbial activity and prevent any pathogens from multiplying. Food products that are on the pH scale of 4.6 or lower are going to control that dangerous growth bacteria. And again, botulism is really the thing that we're super concerned about because it can be very deadly. So things like jams, jellies, preserves are okay, are accepted under the Cottage Food Law, but something like canned whole fruits or canned vegetables, canned meats would not be allowed because they're much higher on that pH scale, and you really have to follow an approved recipe from the U.S. Department of Agriculture to be sure that you're being safe with your products. If you find that, you make an amazing salsa out of carambola and mangoes and, whatever other ingredients, that's not going to be approved under the Cottage Food Law. You would have to go to a commercial kitchen in order to sell your product. So again, jams and jellies, completely allowed under the Cottage Food Law. I have tasted some really amazing jellies over the years, peach preserves and guava jelly and mango jelly. There's lots of good stuff out there. Fruit juice would not be approved under the Cottage Food Law. So you might be thinking, well, what's the difference between making a jam and jelly and what's, between that and a fruit juice? It's really about killing the bacteria. So if you're familiar with canning, you know that there's what's called a kill step. You are processing that food in a way usually a hot water bath of 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the recipe, where you're actually you're bringing that temperature up to the right degrees and killing any microbes that might be living in there. Fruit juice, the minute that you cut your product and it doesn't have that kill step, it's not processed, you're introducing bacteria into the product, which then could multiply exponentially if it's not stored at a proper temperature. So we really want to be careful. And again, because there is no inspection or permitting process with the Cottage Food Law, things like fruit juices are completely out of the question. So approved production locations. Cottage Food Law allows you to make your products in your home residency. If you're a snowbird and you're coming down and you have a second home, that would not be allowed. Your residency is really just the place that where you're living and contains kitchen equipment and appliances that are used in common residential usage. You cannot sell Cottage Food Law in a commercial kitchen. If you do that, you're going into a whole nother world of food safety and food permitting. Garages, sheds, barns, outbuildings are also not approved locations. And just as a side note, the Cottage Food Law is really a unique exemption from food safety laws because it was really created for farmers to create value-added products. So if you are growing mangoes and you can sell your mangoes for a particular price per pound, but if you process your mangoes into a jam or jelly, you might be able to sell that for double the price or 3 times the price. So it's really a way for people and homeowners as well to kind of gauge the market, test their product, see if they're ready to take that leap into a commercial facility or if they're comfortable continuing to work under the Cottage Food Law. So where can you sell your cottage food product? Ultimately, you can only sell it to the end consumer. So you cannot sell to restaurants or wholesale. You can't sell to Publix. You can't sell to any of those big outlets. You can sell your product from your primary residence if your zoning allows you. You could set up at a farmer's market, flea market, roadside stand if your zoning allows for roadside stands. You can do it in person. And just recently, they changed the law in the past few years that you can sell your product online within the state of Florida, but you have to exchange that product in person. So you can advertise, you can show pictures, you can get the money for it, but you have to actually give the item in person. You cannot ship that item. So again, you can't sell wholesale, no restaurants or grocery stores, no mail order, no consignment. I travel a bit around the state and I have seen in some gas stations where there's a cottage food product right next to the register. That would not be allowed. You have to physically give your product to people. You can't give it to your friend that has a little bakery or antique shop and say, hey, can you sell my cottage food product for me? That is not allowed under the law. Labeling is very specific under this law as well. And this is the example that is used and is a great thing to follow. So by law, you have to have the name of what you are selling, your name and your address. That's where the product's going to be made. The ingredients, any type of allergies, as well as the weight of your product. And this very important statement here, which says it is made in a cottage food operation that is not subject to Florida's food safety regulations. There are also other requirements that you need to consider. So beyond the labeling laws and the regulations of the cottage food law, you have to make sure that what you're doing is okay with the city and county. You might need an occupational license to work out of your home. You have to make sure that you have all your tax licensing in place. You will have to pay taxes at the end of the year on your food business. And if for some reason you have a complaint of a foodborne illness coming from your product, you have to allow for inspection. If you deny that inspection, it could include disciplinary action as well as a fine. So again, what is allowed under the cottage food law is low risk food. You don't really hear of a foodborne illness outbreak from bread because bread has a pH that doesn't allow for a lot of microbial activity, and bread also has a low water content. So there's not a whole lot of microbial activity happening in bread that would get people sick, right? Other than maybe mold. But when you're dealing with things like meats or vegetables or salsas or pickles, that if you don't have that correct recipe, that can really get people sick if you don't know what you're doing. So I included a couple questions that I often get from people, and you might recognize these two rascals here in the photo. The questions are, can I use homegrown fruits and vegetables in my baked goods? And the answer is yes. You can grow your fruit in your yard and incorporate that into your product. So you can use it to make jams and jellies, or you can work it into a batter that is properly baked and labeled and packaged. Make sure that you're washing and taking food safety in your kitchen seriously. So it's always a good practice to never pick up fruit that has been dropped on the floor or on the ground. Many of our farmers are not even allowed to sell fruit that has fallen on the ground. So you have to kind of gauge when the right time to pick that fruit is if you want to store it for later. If you're going to use something like a mango in a mango bread, that's fine as long as it's properly baked. You cannot garnish your product with that fresh fruit or vegetable, because again, that's where that food safety risk comes into play. And then a sort of similar question is, can I freeze my homegrown produce and use it in baked goods for a later date? Yes, you can, as long as the frozen fruits or vegetables are incorporated correctly. And again, that you're not using it to garnish with any fresh or frozen fruits or vegetables. Can I serve free samples of my cottage food products? Yes, you can. However, they have to be pre-packaged in your home kitchen. So for example, you can package your dried fruit samples or bread samples into single serving cups with lids at home. And even though you don't need an individual label for each of the sample, you have to have that product properly labeled and displayed so that people know what the ingredients list is and what they're eating. A lot of folks complain that this adds a lot of unnecessary waste, and that's right, it does. I can't argue with you there. But again, this is to really focus us on food safety. So all of this information can be found on the Cottage Food Guidance brochure on the FDAC's website. You can, plop in this link, or you can even just Google Cottage Foods Florida, and this brochure is going to pop up. 2017 is the most recent brochure, and it's a really great resource because people come with all kinds of questions, and it's like, oh, I'm not sure. The minute you change one little thing about your product, it can change, if that product's going to be permitted or regulated or fall under the Cottage Food Law. So look that up to see the full list of what's allowed and what's not allowed. And they also do a really nice job of including common questions. So you may be able to just get the answers that you need by looking at this brochure. If you don't, please do not hesitate to reach out to me, and I can help you get the right answer. And this is just a side note about selling whole or uncut fruits. So I work a lot with farmers, and generally bona fide agricultural producers do not need any type of license or permit to sell uncut, unpackaged, unprocessed whole fruits and vegetables. That's really, really important because, again, the minute that you slice, dice, process a fruit, you may be subject to Florida's food safety laws and permits. So selling whole fruit does not fall under the Cottage Food Law. That's something completely separate. But if you're just harvesting, let's say your mango, and you're wanting to sell it, usually that is allowed. However, you have to check with the county or city to make sure that that's okay. You might live in a zoning area that does not allow you to do that. Usually for agricultural lands, that is allowed. In the estates, I believe that is allowed, but I don't think that people can come to your property in order to purchase those products. It's never a bad idea to double check with the county. In particular, Collier County is very supportive of trying to develop these types of small businesses, but you just have to make sure that it's okay with the folks at the county and that you're not zoned residential or some other way that would not allow you to sell your product. So again, a good rule of thumb is that, pretty much how you harvest it off the plant is unprocessed. The minute that you process it or cut it or slice it or dice it, you're going to be subject to additional regulation. And just a little plug here about a new branding and logo initiative that UF IFAS Extension has been working on with the Southwest Florida Regional Planning Council. And Southwest Florida Fresh Taste the Southwest Florida Difference is the newly revealed logo. And you can go to southwestfloridafresh.com if you have a farm to register, or if you're just interested in finding small to medium-sized producers in our area to get foods. We have actually quite a few tropical fruit growers on there. So if you are looking for local fruit, check out that website. Thank you so much for listening today. If you want more information, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm at Jessica Ryals at ufl.edu. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks so much.